The Vreth Dominion sent their ambassador in a ship the size of a small moon, and I met him with a 9-year-old Labrador retriever named Biscuit. That probably tells you everything you need to know about how humanity approaches diplomacy. My name is Kara Voss, Junior Diplomatic Attaché, third chair on the human delegation to the first formal summit between Earth's Interstellar Council and the Vreth Dominion. I had been chosen partly for my negotiation credentials, partly for my language implants, and partly, I later found out, because my supervisor thought bringing Biscuit along would make us look harmless, approachable, soft. She was not wrong about the last part. The station where we met was called Meridian Point, a neutral platform orbiting a dim yellow star that nobody particularly wanted. It was the kind of place that existed purely for moments like this one, a stage built for first impressions. The corridor walls were polished to a mirror shine. The air smelled like recycled oxygen and quiet anxiety. My heels clicked against the floor as I walked toward the summit hall, and Biscuit padded along beside me, nails ticking, nose working overtime. He was not an impressive animal to look at. His muzzle was gray, his ears were soft and slightly too long for his head. He had developed, in his old age, a habit of walking with his tongue out, even when he was not particularly warm. He weighed 34 kilograms and moved with the dignified, unhurried pace of a creature who had long ago decided that rushing was for younger dogs. I scratched behind his ears before we went in. He gave my hand one slow lick. Then we walked through the doors. The Vreth are tall. I knew this from the briefing files, but files do not prepare you for the physical reality of standing in a room with 6 beings who are each roughly 2.5 meters tall, covered in overlapping dark scales, with wide amber eyes that do not blink at the same rate human eyes do. They have 4 arms, the upper 2 for gesturing and weapons, the lower 2 for tools and fine work. Their voices, when they speak, vibrate at a frequency you feel in your chest before you process it in your ears. Ambassador Ketchow was the tallest. He stood at the center of his delegation like a monument. He wore ceremonial armor that probably weighed more than I did, etched with the marks of 17 military campaigns. When he saw me walk in, his expression shifted, something I could not immediately read. Then he saw Biscuit. The sound that came out of him was extraordinary. It started low and built into something sharp and percussive, like rocks cracking apart underwater. I recognized it from my language files as high-register amusement. He turned to his delegation and made the same sound, louder, and they responded in kind. One of them pointed at Biscuit with a lower arm. Another made a gesture I was told later translated roughly as, "Look at this soft, helpless thing." Ketchow looked back at me and spoke through the translation module embedded in the room's walls. "This," he said, "is what humans bring to a summit with the Vreth Dominion, a small, dull creature that cannot run, cannot fight, and appears to be falling asleep on its feet." Biscuit was, in fact, sitting down. He had found a spot near my left foot and settled onto it the way he always did, with a long exhale, like the weight of the world had finally been set down somewhere comfortable. "He is my companion," I said. "He has been with me for 9 years." "You carry a helpless animal everywhere you go," Ketchow said, "for comfort." "Yes," I said. This produced another round of amusement from the Vreth delegation. I smiled and waited for it to finish. I was good at waiting. Biscuit was better at it than I was. The summit began in earnest about 20 minutes later, after the formal introductions, the ritual exchange of statements of intent, and a long procedural discussion about the order in which documents would be reviewed. I sat at the wide curved table across from Ketchow. Biscuit lay under the table near my feet. Occasionally, I could hear him breathing. The Vreth's opening position was not subtle. They wanted 3 human colony worlds on the border of their expansion zone. Not destroyed, they clarified, simply placed under Vreth administrative oversight, which meant Vreth law, Vreth resource extraction, and Vreth garrison forces. They also wanted what they called a knowledge contribution, a package of human propulsion research and medical data that would take decades to develop and that we had spent enormous resources building. In exchange, they were offering to not treat us as a threat. That was the deal. Take it or lose what you have. I kept my voice even. I asked questions. I took notes. I pointed out, politely and with specific legal citations, that the colonies in question were home to over 200 million human beings who had rights under 6 separate interstellar agreements that the Vreth had themselves signed. Ketchau listened to all of this with the patient expression of someone who has already decided the outcome and is waiting for the other party to catch up. It was around the 3rd hour that he authorized the demonstration. He announced it simply, a display of Vreth military capability, as a courtesy, so that humanity understood the nature of the partnership being offered. 2 of his aides left the room. I heard sounds from the external hangar bay, heavy magnetic clamps releasing, the deep mechanical groan of something large being moved. Then the bay doors opened on the far side of the hall's viewport, and I saw it. The Type 7 Siegewalker was a machine that the Vreth used for planetary surface operations. It stood on 6 articulated legs, each as thick as a support column. Its main body was roughly the size of a small building. It had 4 forward weapon arrays, 2 lateral shield generators, and an outer shell made of a ceramic alloy composite that human weapons testing had so far been unable to meaningfully damage. It walked with a slow, deliberate weight that shook the floor even through the station's dampeners. It was, without question, one of the most dangerous pieces of military hardware in the known systems. Ketchau watched my face as it came into view. I was watching Biscuit. Biscuit had been asleep under the table, or at least, that was what I assumed. His eyes had been closed, his breathing slow and regular. But the moment the Siegewalker crossed the threshold of the hangar bay, something changed. I felt it before I saw it. A shift in the air near my feet. A change in the rhythm of his breath. I looked down. He was standing. All 4 legs, weight forward, nose pointed directly at the viewport. His tail had stopped wagging. His ears, normally loose and floppy, were forward and rigid. Every muscle in his old body was still and focused in a way I had not seen in years. I knew that posture. I had seen it once before, when Biscuit was 3 years old and had located something in the walls of my apartment that turned out, upon professional investigation, to be a nest of something that was not quite rats, and not quite anything else. The exterminator had refused to file a report. I still did not know what they had found. I picked up my water glass, took a calm sip, and moved 3 large steps to the left. Ketchau noticed my movement. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "Nothing at all," I said. "Please, continue." Biscuit walked out from under the table. He did not run. Biscuit had not run in at least 4 years, and even in his youth, running had always seemed to him like a suggestion rather than a requirement. He walked, that same dignified, unhurried pace, across the polished floor of the summit hall, past the Vreth delegation, toward the viewport, and the open doors of the hangar bay beyond. One of Ketchau's guards stepped into his path and made a sharp downward gesture, the universal body language for stop. Biscuit looked at the guard with the specific expression that Labradors have perfected over 10,000 years of domestication, the one that says, "I hear you, and I respect you, and I am going to do this anyway," and walked around him. He entered the hangar. I heard the guard say something to Ketchau. I heard Ketchau make a dismissive sound. "The creature is harmless. What is it going to do?" I did not translate this for my colleagues at the table. I just watched through the viewport. Biscuit approached the Siegewalker from the front left leg. He sniffed it, the way he sniffed everything, thoroughly, unhurried, working from the base of the strut upward. The walker's sensor array rotated toward him. Presumably some Vreth operator somewhere was looking at a screen showing a 34-kilogram elderly dog investigating their most advanced ground weapon and wondering what the correct protocol was. Then Biscuit opened his mouth. I will not pretend I was not still surprised, even after 9 years. It is the kind of thing that does not become ordinary, no matter how many times you witness it. His jaw opened wider than a Labrador's jaw opens. Then wider than that. The geometry of it was wrong, in a way that was deeply uncomfortable to look at directly, the way certain optical illusions feel like they are pulling at something behind your eyes. There was no sound, no drama. Biscuit simply opened his mouth to a size that should not have been possible and bit into the front left leg of the Type 7 Siegewalker. The ceramic alloy composite, the material that human weapons testing had been unable to meaningfully damage, came apart like old bread. He ate the leg. Then he moved, methodically, to the next one, then the next. The walker's systems were clearly active. I could see the weapon arrays moving, tracking him, and I could hear the low hum of systems cycling up to defensive configurations. None of it did anything. Biscuit worked his way around the machine with the calm focus of a dog who has found something interesting and intends to finish investigating it completely. The entire Vreth delegation had stopped breathing. Ketchow had risen from his seat. He was standing completely still, all four arms at his sides, amber eyes fixed on the viewport. I watched his face, the mandibles slightly apart, the brow ridges elevated, the posture of a being whose framework for understanding the world was quietly being revised. It took Biscuit 4 minutes and 17 seconds to consume the siege walker entirely. I timed it. When he was done, he turned around and walked back into the summit hall. He crossed the floor, returned to his spot beside my chair, sat down, and looked up at me with an expression of profound, uncomplicated satisfaction. I reached into my jacket pocket and gave him a small treat, dried sweet potato, his favorite. He ate it in one bite and thumped his tail twice against the floor. The room was silent. Ketchow sat back down very slowly. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, in a voice that was considerably quieter than any voice he had used since we arrived, "What is that animal?" I considered the question. "He is my companion," I said. "He has been with me for 9 years." Ketchow's mandibles pressed together. "That is not an answer." "No," I agreed. "It is not." I could have told him more. I could have mentioned the 412-page classified report that Earth's Xenobiological Survey Division had compiled on Biscuit after the apartment incident, the one that covered 17 separate physical impossibilities, 6 failed attempts to take a blood sample, and a lengthy section on what happened to the equipment used in those attempts. I could have mentioned that the report's conclusion, on page 411, read, "We do not know what this entity is, where it originates, or what its limits are, if any exist. We recommend against further provocation and suggest that its current living arrangement be maintained indefinitely." I did not mention any of this. I scratched Biscuit's ears. He leaned into my hand. Ketchow requested a recess. 3 hours. When the Vreth delegation returned to the table, the document in front of them was different. The colony demands were gone. The knowledge contribution clause was gone. What they had instead was a proposal for a mutual research accord. Specifically, they wanted to understand what Biscuit was and whether other humans had companions like him. I told them honestly that I would share everything humanity knew on the subject. The report was 412 pages. The conclusion was that we did not know. I watched Ketchow absorb this information. I watched him process the idea that humanity had been living alongside something we could not classify or explain, had been taking it to diplomatic summits on other planets, and had been feeding it dried sweet potato treats from a jacket pocket. We signed the treaty that afternoon: mutual non-aggression, shared navigation rights, open trade in 4 categories of goods, the most favorable terms any human delegation had obtained from a Vreth counterpart in recorded history. I signed my name at the bottom of the document with Biscuit asleep on my feet, his paws twitching slightly, running after something in a dream I would never have access to. That evening I filed my mission report. The sections on diplomacy, negotiation strategy, and treaty outcomes were flagged as exemplary. The section on Biscuit was flagged, escalated, reviewed by 3 admirals, and classified within 6 hours. One of the admirals sent me a personal message asking where Biscuit had come from originally. I told her the truth. He had shown up outside my apartment building 9 years ago, sitting on the front step in the rain, looking at me with those calm, dark eyes. I had taken him inside, dried him off, and given him the rest of a sandwich I had been saving for lunch. He had put his head in my lap and gone to sleep, and he had been following me around ever since. She did not respond to that message. I took Biscuit for his evening walk when I got back to my quarters. He sniffed a wall panel that seemed to interest him. He investigated a piece of synthetic turf near the station's small green space with thorough professionalism. He sat on my foot on the transport back. I looked at him in the low light and thought, not for the first time, that whatever Biscuit actually was, he had chosen to be a dog. He seemed to find it genuinely satisfying. The tail wags were real. The treat enthusiasm was real. The way he put his head on my knee at the end of a long day and exhaled like everything was finally right with the world, that was real too. Whatever he was underneath, he had decided to be this. I could not think of a better way to spend eternity than being someone's good boy.